Welcome back. Now, Bob Brown made his valedictory appearance at the National Press Club last week with some pretty contented Greens around him, despite predictions that support for the Greens would wither after he announced his departure back in April. In fact, the Greens polling numbers, if anything, have risen slightly. Greens Deputy Leader Adam Bandt joins us now. Good morning.
Morning.
Now, why is it, do you think, that the Greens have gone up, if anything, in the polls since Bob Brown stepped back?
Because I think we've got some pretty clear values, and if you ask most people in the street what do the Greens stand for, then probably compared with, say, the Democrats or compared with even any of the other parties around at the moment, we're the one who, you know, people would know what we stand for.
But that would have been the case under Bob Brown as well. So how do you explain an actual slight tick up? Not that I want to get too poll-driven, but you know, that's contrary to most people's expectations.
Well, look, I mean, it's all within margin of error, so we're not saying we're going up or saying we're going down, but it is clear from all the polls that we are holding steady, and I think it does just come back to that point that we believe in things, and people like that, and regardless of who our leaders are, I think it's those things that we believe in that attracts people to vote for us.
OK, well, one thing you believe in is to tax the miners as much as possible, and you're suggesting now that the mining tax that is now in place has an enormous central flaw that you want to change.
Yeah, I don't think we believe in taxing them as much as possible, but getting a fair return from the minerals that we own. And we've got a false flaw in the mining tax at the moment, where essentially the states can increase their royalties, and that reduces the amount of money that goes to the Commonwealth. And that was part of the last-minute deal that was done to get it through, and it's an appalling part. It's a ridiculous part. It means there's now effectively a money go round where states and Commonwealth are haggling over increased royalties and then taking it off elsewhere. So the next time that we have an available opportunity, so when any review legislation comes up, we'll be moving amendments to fix that loophole, so that if the states do increase royalties, it won't affect what has to be paid under the mining tax. And I think that will force a more sensible arrangement between the Commonwealth and the states over it, and secure the revenue for the Commonwealth.
Mr Bandt, I'm back on the carbon price. Your leader recently said that were Labor to change leaders, the Greens deal would still maintain with the government. But one of the reasons that Labor might change, were that to happen, would be to tinker with the carbon price. Would the Greens consider any sort of tinkering at all, or would that void the agreement that you have with the government?
Well, we prioritise stability, and we've signed an agreement with Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan, and it's our expectation that that'll go for the full 3 years, and that we'll end up with the same leaders of the Labor Party going to the election in a year or so's time. Now, that agreement is obviously premised on both sides abiding by it, and we've abided by it, and I expect the government will continue to as well. I think it would be, I know there's a lot of talk about potential changes to the price on pollution legislation. I think it's actually quite difficult to do, and I think that a lot of people who speculate about this don't quite understand that the money that's being raised from the big polluters through the price on pollution, it's actually going in large part to household compensation, lifting the tax-free threshold and so on. It's very difficult to start tinkering with one part without it also affecting the others, and that's why I think a lot of it is just speculation.
Just very quickly, did you expect it to be as unpopular as it is when you reached this deal?
I think one of the criticisms I guess I'd have about what's happened since the legislation was passed is that we haven't gone back to basics enough and explained what this is all about. This is about trying to get us away from an economy based on pollution to a clean energy economy, and I think the more we talk about that, the more the question should be, you know, does Tony Abbott support pollution? Does Tony Abbott support an economy based on pollution, or does he support changing it? And I think if that was the conversation we were having instead of one about prices and taxes and so on, I think we might be seeing different polling numbers.
Well, there's another conversation going on in Queensland at the moment. The Premier there, Campbell Newman, is completely ropeable. This is after the Environment Minister, Tony Burke, insisted that the feds will now take over the environmental assessment at the Alpha Coal project, $6 billion project. Here was Campbell Newman's reaction.
I give notice to the Prime Minister that if she doesn't pull Minister Burke into line, I will campaign relentlessly in every federal Labor member's electorate.
Why do you think Tony Burke intervened here? Some senior LNP figures in Queensland suggest it's because Labor's trying to woo back voters that the Greens have taken from them, specifically in Sydney and Melbourne.
Well, I don't know if that's why, but I do think it is a bit of a phony war that's going on. I mean, let's not forget that only a short time ago it was Tony Burke and Julia Gillard who were saying we want to effectively allow states to determine whether these kind of proposals are allowed to go ahead or not. And let's also not forget that both Labor and Liberal are right behind a massive expansion of coal in Queensland, to the point where the Great Barrier Reef is going to become a coal highway. At the moment we've got 1,700 ships going through there a year. That's going to get up to 10,000 by 2020 if Labor and Liberal have their way. And so I do think it's a bit confected, and I do think that we've got to take the politics out of it and get back to the central question: what are we going to do to protect the Great Barrier Reef? And at the moment, that's being lost in this phony debate.
On an issue that's close to your heart, on same-sex marriage, there's been some talk about an increased level of hate mail that some MPs have been receiving. Have you noticed a trend that you're getting more hate mail, more calls? Is it more vitriolic than information that you've received from electors in the past?
Oh, certainly the most vitriolic emails I've received have been about this issue, and I think people tend to think it's pretty easy to just sit down there and send an email and send it off into the ether. But we've been receiving dozens of them, and I do think
is it alarming?
Well, I think it is alarming. I think that there's concern that the closer we get to equality, the more vitriolic these attacks are going to become, and people feel like they've got a bit of a licence to talk about these kind of personal things in very offensive ways. And I am worried by it, but I do think that once these people are on the wrong side of history, and once things move on, I hope that recedes.
Mr. Bandt, do the Greens accept any responsibility for the increased deaths at sea of asylum seekers trying to get here by boat?
No, I mean, because we've always said, look, if you want to have a regional approach, have a regional approach, but it should be a regional approach that's centred on protecting the rights and the lives of the peoples concerned, and that's where we're different from the other parties, because for the other parties it's about criminalising it, focusing on so-called people smugglers, whereas why is it the case that we've only got less than, you can count on one hand the number of officials that we've got in places like Indonesia processing these applications? And if people are stuck in camps for a very long time, even after they've been found to be refugees, of course they're going to take desperate measures. And if we had more people there and a greater emphasis on a regional solution looking after their rights rather than just chest beating, we might not have people taking to boats. And so
not at any point have you felt any qualm in your stomach that by standing against the Malaysia solution you might be contributing to deaths at sea?
No, because I don't think that... we've signed up to these international conventions to protect people's rights, and so why do we sign up to these international conventions only to then outsource these obligations?
Adam Bandt, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks also to our panel, Sabra and to Mark. A transcript and a replay of the program will be on our website and the Facebook page, as always. Until next week, goodbye.
I love